Before we get into today's video, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed. It's totally free and allows you to never miss one of our videos.
As he entered the room, his eyes were not full of fear. He did not tremble or panic, but instead he strode with determination and focus. In that moment, he knew no fear, only purpose. I want there to be absolutely no ambiguity about what I am about to tell you. I hate humans. They are too small to be warriors, too big to be mechanics or repair species, and too clumsy to be artists. Their brains are too small to be great engineers or scientists, and their bodies are too weak to be builders and laborers. Humans are by far the most useless creatures to ever roam the galaxy. On paper. For some reason, despite having no naturally developed weapons or armor, no latent psionic ability, a complete and utter lack of substantial cranial or physical size or muscle mass, these stupid Deathworld inhabitants are capable of doing just about anything that is demanded of them. Need one to fix a pipe in a maintenance corridor of a ship? They can get it done, somehow. Need an advanced spacecraft, power plant, or even a warp drive engineered or built? Humans can do it, and it will work. The catch is it will likely be unstable, dangerous, and when pulled apart by anyone who knows more, it will resemble a bomb more than an actually functioning piece of hardware. But if you need something destroyed, killed, or reduced to atoms within a small time frame, a human is not only the best option, but likely cheaper than any alternative. I found that out during the Sagat void lift a few galactic cycles ago. For anyone who managed to miss the second biggest event of the 70-30 galactic cycles, here is the short summary. A small alliance of the Northern Trade Commission, the Nebula Combine, and the Blue Theocracy all agreed that any people or planet that refused to do business with them would be subject to embargoes and blockades. The Intergalactic Community, or IGC, struggled to keep this trade federation from overstepping its bounds as a trade group until Sagat decided that they would prefer to be independent. The Trade Federation did not like that very much at all. A large blockade was organized just outside the reach of Sagat's orbital defense platforms, and a large number of heavy cruisers with jump interdictors were positioned roughly across from the orbital defense platforms. 2 titanic lines of ships and defense platforms had weapon stations crewed and anxiety peaked. And that is where people like my friends and I come into play. You see, it is very easy to blow a ship out of orbit should it be moving at a reasonable pace. But shooting a ship moving twice the speed of light is nigh impossible. Jump coordination crews suddenly become the most valuable teams in IGC space. One jump into Sagat orbit could net you well over 1 million credits per teammate. Even after fuel expenses, it was well worth the risk. However, that risk was fairly high. Getting caught by the Trade Federation was a one-way trip to a penal colony in the Outer Ring, and burning to death in high orbit was honestly one of the worst ways to die in space. It's not fast like rapid decompression, or painless like a gas leak or chemical detonation. Becoming a living void ration in an oven was honestly a fairly horrific thought. Luckily, my crew was one of the best ever put together during the void lift. We were a team of 4. Phaeon was our navigator, and the most Alaton and Alaton can be. Slender build, sharp features, and emerald green eyes that would reflect starlight if all the lights in the room were out. You could easily mistake her for a human, but unlike most humans, Phaeon could speak numerous languages throughout the galaxy. Even among Alantans, she was fiercely intelligent, and was proud of that too. After her was Zex, a simple gray. He always had a big smile on his face, no matter what was happening. Grays are weird like that,
always overly jovial, even in life or death situations. He was also the smallest member of the team, so the fact that he was our ship engineer made life easy. Anything that broke, he could diagnose and fix with ease. Then there was Tulla, a Scifi warrior through and through. For any humans reading this log, the best way to describe a Sciatian would be small bipedal hippopotamus, typically reaching a height of 7 feet or a little over 2 meters tall. Tulla is, and always has been, a rather blunt individual, typical of his people. He was our defense systems operator, probably the best one in the galaxy. Tulla was also the one who suggested our 5th member. I'll get to him after myself. My call sign is Geist, and that's what everyone calls me. I'm the pilot, and a good one at that. One of Allentan's finest, if I do say so myself. Anyway, the human. I first met the strange creature when we were getting a shipment of medical supplies and hydroponics equipment for Segat. I was looking out the glass steel windows, verifying that the external thrusters were functioning. They were, for the record. Luckily for me, out this window, I could also see the airlock tunnel that connected us to the IGC aid station that gave us equipment and cargo for shipments. And in that tunnel, I saw Tulla and a human carrying a large box. I went to meet them at the command bucket at the front of the ship, as it's the only place Tulla would logically go. I was right, and when I got there, I saw Tulla speaking to Phain. He was reciting some grand tale of his exploits from his time in the Sciati legions. Phain was clearly more interested in whoever was behind him, but could not discreetly look past Tulla's notable size. Zex was speaking to someone sitting in my seat behind the controls of our cargo hauler. I could hear him explaining how the ship worked, which confused me. We did have a practice of ensuring everyone in the team could pilot the hauler, but I was under the impression we were still a team of 4 at the time.
The lever to your right controls the gravitational influence of the vessel. It is set to max currently. This influences a force from the roof of the vessel towards the belly at a force of roughly... Zex paused in the middle of his explanation of how the hauler worked to type rapidly on his wrist-mounted computer. 9½ meters per second, with an exponent of 2, Zex said with his usual bright smile. Right on, mate. I've got to cut a few kilos off me weight without a diet. The human in my chair spoke with a smile, before looking over his shoulder at Zex and myself. Oh, fuck me, mate. You didn't tell me you had another pretty Sheila on board. The human quickly jumped to his feet and extended a hand to me in a bewildering greeting. G'day, mate. I'm Cat. The human spoke as if he was addressing a friend from school, but his words sounded more like an insult to my intelligence. I took a step back from the human, my face contorting into a scowl. Excuse me, but what are you doing on my ship? I barked at the human. He looked at me confused for a moment before replying. I'm your new mate, he said before extending his hand towards me again, and again I stepped away. Tulla finally took notice of this individual in my seat and excused himself from his conversation with Phain. Geist, there you are, he exclaimed. I'd never seen him this happy to talk about something that wasn't his time in the Legion. This is Cat. He's the onboard security specialist I was talking about. Tulla looked at me for a second or two before noticing my irritation with our new co-worker. Is there something wrong? He asked tepidly. This vulgar ape has been cursing like a mercenary, calling himself a house cat, and insisting I am some sort of mate of his. I barked, my irritation bleeding into my tone. Tulla just nodded and smiled. Cat is an Australian, he said calmly. I simply looked at Tulla with bewilderment after he said this. Upon Earth, there is a nation that encapsulates the whole of a continent. They both share the name of Australia. For the inhabitants of Australia, vulgarity is used more as emphasis, not as an insult. And mate is just local slang for friend, Geist. Tuller looked at the human cat, as if awaiting approval or praise, like an epsilon retriever hound does after it fetches a stick for its master. And sure as hell he got it. "Blimey, mate, I thought you just tuned me out when I started banting about the land down under," Cat said before batting his forearm into Tuller's shoulder. "My brother, I would never tune out tales of the death world that bore the galaxy's second most fierce warriors," Tuller said with a smirk. The human gave Tuller a snigger and punched Tuller lightly in the side. "You so sure of that? How about you tango with an Aussie bloke who's been fighting Joeys since before he could walk?" the human said as he traded sparring blows with Tuller. "Enough!" I finally snapped at the two. "If you two are so determined to kill one another, please do so away from my flight controls." I growled at the two buffoons that still stood frozen in their combative stances. "Of course, apologies, Geist. We can continue what we started in the fitness room. Have you seen it yet, my brother?" Tuller asked his human colleague as they began walking down the hall towards the small onboard gymnasium. "Nah, mate, I've been here, 10 minutes? The human chuckled as they ventured far enough down the hall that their voices became distant and indistinguishable from the hum of the cargo hauler. Irritated and already tired of our new crewmate, I simply went to my seat behind the controls to ensure the human didn't break anything. Instead of sitting gracefully down in my seat, I felt as though I fell into a now overly reclined seat. Ugh! Who needs a seat this far back? And why is it so reclined? It's a chair, not a bed, I grumbled aloud to myself. As I was resetting the chair that so desperately needed it, I was startled by a small gray figure on my right. "Geist?" Zex spoke with an unfamiliar confusion in his tone. "Are you unhappy with the addition of a security specialist aboard our vessel? The red coloration in your face and heightened cardiac activity suggest you are experiencing emotional distress." Zex spoke as he played with his wrist-mounted computer. I gritted my teeth a little prior to responding. "I thought I told you not to scan me without warning, Zex," I growled at the gray. "Oh," he said with his usual happy and excited tone returning. "My apologies, Geist. The initial assumption was correct. Clearly you are experiencing far more pleasant emotions towards Cat." The smile on Zex's face grew as he spoke. I threw something at his bulbous head, but he was far enough away to dodge. I think it was a drink ration pouch. "I swear to the Creator!" I shouted at the little roach before he scrambled out of the control bucket and ran down the hall, giggling like a child. I simply sat back down and finished readjusting my seat. A few planetary hours later, we managed to get fully loaded and depart the IGC station. The initial launch was slow, and jumping to FTL was going to have to be done further away from the station than usual due to higher levels of void traffic. We were only a few moments from the jump, so I elected to address everyone on the deck. "All right, standard mission. What we are hauling is incredibly valuable to the people of Seget. Tuller, I want you and the human to get some rest before we go through Sector 636 Delta Epsilon. There have been more pirate sightings lately, so I want both of you ready for when—" Tuller threw up his hands as if to ask a question. "Yes, Tuller," I questioned, looking at him with confusion. "Which human do you want to rest?" he asked with a strange look on his face. "I was under the impression you only brought the one on board, right, Tuller?" I asked, with irritation growing in my tone. "I did. The one I allowed to board is named Cat, and I only see 4 of us on the bridge right now, so unless there is another human on board that I do not know about, I think it would be best to use our newest member's name, Geist," Tuller said with a look that an annoyed parent would give to an obnoxious child. I scowled at the tisk-tisk nature of his words.
"And what gives you the authority to speak to me like this?" I asked Tuller.
Section 2199, subsection F of the Intergalactic Community's completed guide on interaction between species,
he barked as a lawyer would in a courtroom.
Quote, whilst the history between the IGC members tends to be stained with blood and betrayal, all StarCraft crews must act in an appropriate manner towards one another to promote cohesiveness and cooperation between all aboard any StarCraft in question. This can be done by learning the proper pronunciation of all crew members' names. In lieu of proper pronunciation, a pronounceable nickname for a crew member is also permissible, should their native language be too incompatible with a crew member's vocal capabilities. End quote.
Tuller said sternly, an annoyance in his expression towards me. I struggled to find anything of value to say at that moment. Maybe Tuller was right. Maybe the human slang offended me for unjustifiable reasons, and it was affecting our ability as a crew.
I'll tell Cat to try and get some rest. I have a feeling he's going to need it should we be at such odds too long into our journey,
Tuller said as he marched down the hallway, irritation still permeating his visage. I didn't say anything. I simply put the hauler on the course to Seget. A few hours passed, and everything was going well. The hauler was humming through FTL without a hitch. Fane's scanners were showing a clear pathway ahead. Zex's were showing all systems were nominal, and Tuller's station was silent.
"Hey, Geist,"
Fane spoke to me. I looked over at my fellow Alatan to see her standing shyly a short distance from my pilot seat. "Yes, Fane?" I asked calmly.
"Are you all right? You've seemed really out of it since you and Tuller spoke earlier,"
she said, nervously rubbing her balled-up hands together in front of her collar to relieve the stress that was building in her. "Yeah, I'm all right, Fane. I'm sorry if I upset you earlier," I said to her, forcing what little of a smile I could. It seemed to calm her, for she forced her own smile out and spoke with a slightly more animated tone.
"Oh, no, you didn't upset me at all. Fights don't really tend to do that."
A small crack in her voice suggested otherwise. "Well, what does upset you?" Before I could fully ask my inquiry, the cargo hauler rudely interrupted and answered for her. A loud and blaring alert came from Tuller's console, then another from Fane's. Zex entered the room with a snack ration in his hand, just as his station began its howl. Then Tuller's station began flashing red and screaming its own jarring alert.
"What has occurred?"
Zex blurted out before Tuller stormed in and knocked Zex aside in his rush towards his station.
"That's bad,"
Tuller growled at his screen. "What is?" I shouted, panic beginning to grip me. Tuller simply spun me around and pointed out the front glass of the cargo hauler.
"That!"
he barked. Looking out the glass, I saw what it was that had set off all the alarms and warning sirens. An unidentified vessel had managed to pull us out of hyperspace without us noticing, and now had its weapons systems trained on us. The ship slowly lumbered over us and extended its boarding tube. The connection was fast, and the movement of the creatures inside was fast.
"Pirates! Oh, God, please don't be pirates!"
Fane cried out loud, cupping her hands over her mouth in terror. Tuller checked that the arc-caster on his hip was fully charged before stepping towards the door at the back of the command bucket.
"Everyone stay here. I'm going to get Cat and we can get all of this sorted out. Just stay calm and—"
Before Tuller could finish reassuring us, the back door opened and a single shocking flash of yellow energy dug deep into Tuller's shoulder. In an instant, he fell to the floor of the hauler and dropped his weapon, and a fresh pool of magenta blood formed on the floor. Through the darkness of the hallway behind the door stepped the blue-scaled figure of an Oshkan pirate, the lips of his long mouth full of razor-sharp teeth pulled back into a smile.
"On your knees, or we're having scifi steaks for dinner,"
the Oshkan hissed at us, and immediately Phaein, Zex, and myself dropped to our knees and held our hands high. After a nod from the first Oshkin, 5 more entered the command bucket and began pulling our arms behind our backs, cuffing us one at a time with auto shackles. Then the lead Oshkin grabbed a small transponder and flicked it on.
7, 9, 12, get down here, it's secured,
he hissed into his transponder. Soon after, the sound of footfalls on the metal flooring of the hauler could be heard down the hall. Another click of the transponder, and we heard one of their voices through the speaker.
Captain, all the lights are off. Mind giving us some light down here?
He jeered. The captain rolled his eyes and began looking at my control panel for the button to switch off the emergency lights.
Geist, what's going to happen to us?
Phaein asked me with tears welling up in her eyes. I could only shake my head in response. The shock of the situation at hand was still a lot to take in. One of the pirates decided to weigh in on Phaein's question.
Well, darling, Alatan girls fetch a good price on the markets of Velch. Your friends might be good for hard labor.
The Oshkin let out a heinous chuckle from his guts, and 2 of his fellow pirates joined in. Phaein fought back tears.
Well, maybe we keep one for ourselves,
another pirate croaked. More malefic laughter followed. At this point, Phaein couldn't hold back anymore, and the tears fell from her eyes in droplets big enough to fill hydration ration caps. One of the pirates began looking around the command bucket to see if there was anything of value to take, before a loud boom echoed from down the halls. The pirates all shot confused looks at one another before their captain pointed at 2 of them.
You 2, go figure out what the hell that was, now!
The 2 pirates both barked an acknowledgement of the order provided before making their way down the hall towards whatever made that sound. Another pirate began checking all the cameras aboard the cargo hauler. Starboard halls were empty, port holes were empty, and the hallway outside the command bucket was empty. And then there were the hallways next to the cargo bay. One Oshkin pirate was laying on the ground in a puddle of black, oily blood, bisected at the waist.
"Oh, Captain!"
one of the pirates barked out. The captain waddled over to his subordinate. The look of concern on his face told the whole story of what he was thinking.
"Search the cameras! Find what did this!"
the captain bellowed at the pirate in front of Tulla's terminal. The pirate nodded and began frantically searching the cameras in the halls of the ship. The captain then looked at us and pointed his laser rifle at my face.
"What is your cargo?"
he demanded of me. My mouth fell open with shock. "Medical aid and orbital farming equipment, hydroponics gear," I stuttered out, the terror of certain death being a mere trigger pull away, a harrowing thought in my mind. Another loud boom echoed down the halls, this one far closer than the last. The captain looked around at the 3 other pirates in the command bucket, then pointed at one of them.
"You, go check that."
The pirate in question nodded before stepping out into the hallway. A split second later, another thunderous boom shook the command deck, and the pirate in the doorway's arm was ripped off at the shoulder, his limp body hitting the cold white floor panels as he began spasming and gagging on the breathable air in the cargo hauler. The other pirates rushed to grab a shield in the form of the crewmates they had before them. The captain shouted out at the creature that lurked in the halls of the cargo hauler.
"You there! Stop what you are doing immediately! We have your friends at laser point, and will not hesitate to turn their heads to glass! Surrender or they die!"
the captain shouted, fear gripping his expression and tone.
"Oi, fuckhead!"
the shadowed figure in the dark growled.
"Why the fuck would I not turn you cocksuckers to gator curry if you shoot me mates? What the hell is stopping me, pal?"
I finally realized the human was the one in the hall. All I could think was, please don't get us killed. But I couldn't exactly help. The captain of the pirates looked to his friends before responding.
"Good point. Throw that infernal weapon of yours into the room, or the Grey gets it,"
the captain bellowed. Zex looked at us with terror in his eyes, the look in his eyes pleading for us to do something, anything. Then the captain shouted again.
You've got to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Before the captain could put a bolt through Zex's torso, the human screamed out,
All right, you win. Stop fucking counting.
He shouted from the hole. The Oshkin captain smiled a wicked smile.
Good. Now throw it in,
he hissed, pleased with himself. A moment later, a small silver and green cylinder flew into the room, and the human outside screamed,
Think fast, Chuckle Nuts.
His bark was cut off by the loud crack and bright flash the cylinder produced. Now, what I am about to describe next, I could not see due to aforementioned flash and crack, so I'll describe what I saw through the recordings taken of the event afterwards. In the moment after the detonation, the human entered the room with a strange weapon in his hands, a long metal tube with a wooden stock and a small wooden grip near the front. The 3 pirates were in no condition to fight, but the human was. As he entered the room, his eyes were not full of fear. He did not tremble or panic, but instead he strode with determination and focus. In that moment, he knew no fear, only purpose. He pointed his weapon at the first of the 3 pirates and discharged it into his chest. It cut the Oshkin in 2 at the abdomen and splattered the inky blood across the starboard window of the cargo hauler's window. He quickly pulled the wooden foregrip backwards along the rail and slammed it forwards. As it made contact with the front of its rail, the weapon discharged once more, this time turning the top of a second pirate's head to mincemeat and viscera. Cat again threw the wooden grip forwards and back, only for his weapon to produce a disheartening click. As everyone else's vision came back to us in an instant, along with the majority of our hearing, the human swung the stock of his weapon into the Oshkin's face. It connected with a sharp thwack, and knocked the captain off his feet for a moment. Regaining his footing, he rushed at the human with a growl, and tried to clasp his gaping jaws around the human's head. Cat forced his weapon back into the corners of the Oshkin's mouth to parry the life-threatening attack, and with a roar forced the blue-scaled monster back against the blood-smeared window. Jerking the barrel of his weapon from the mouth of his opponent, Cat bashed the stock into the Oshkin's head, further disorienting him. Cat then turned to us.
Cut your hands free, fuckers!
He barked out before dropping a knife next to Fane and I. He then turned back towards the captain and raised his weapon up. He pulled a small red and brass cylinder from his jacket and jammed it into the bottom of his weapon before throwing the grip forwards and backwards again.
Human!
The Oshkin roared as he leapt towards Cat, grasping Cat's weapon with his hands, trying desperately to wrestle the weapon away from the human. He snapped his jaws at Cat's head repeatedly, trying his hardest to steal it from its rightful owner. Cat finally managed to get his leg between himself and the Oshkin, and kicked hard. The Oshkin was forced back, slipping on the puddle of Tulla's blood and crashing to the floor panel beneath him. Cat wasted no time pointing the barrel of his weapon towards the captain's chest.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
His command went unfulfilled, and a fireball leapt from the barrel of his weapon and tore the chest cavity of the Oshkin open. In his last moments, the captain clawed desperately at his chest in a fleeting attempt to stem the bleeding inflicted from the weapon.
Get to your seats,
Cat said as he marched over to my controls. By this point, we had all managed to release ourselves from the bonds that the pirates had put us in, and all scrambled to our seats. I dashed over to the pilot's seat to see Cat sitting in it, gripping the gravitational control and the thruster control in his hands. He looked back at me with a smirk.
You trust me, mate?
He asked calmly. No, I stuttered.
Well, too late now. Hold on.
With one thrust of his arms, he set ship gravity to max and thrust to max as well. The increased force of G's pulled the boarding tube in two, sucking the atmosphere within out into the void of space. The hauler thundered forwards, the emergency airlock closing the gap that the boarding tube had left. Our speed increased quickly. The weapon systems on the pirate vessel turned towards our cargo holder and began their locking process. Cat wasted no time slamming his fist into the jump button on the command console. The stars became bright through the glass, and the black void of space turned blue as we exceeded light speed. Tuller's console stopped its beeping, and the gravity equalized out in the ship. My legs could float down to the floor and hold my balance.
"All right, he's not dead. Sound off,"
Cat announced to the cabin, a smile on his exhausted face.
"I am alive and unharmed,"
Zex coughed out, relief washing over him.
"My arm hurts,"
Tuller whined.
"My arm hurts."
Tuller whined with a smile, happy to be alive as well.
"I want to go home,"
Fane sobbed out, still terrified from her encounter with the pirates. "I second Fane's statement," I said, still halfway in shock. Everyone aboard laughed at that one, thankfully. All right, Fane didn't laugh, but she had been through a lot. We were able to make it to Seget without any further issue. We managed to drop out of FTL speed right behind the orbital defense platforms of Seget and fly down to the planet's surface to unload our cargo. Whilst getting Tuller's arm fixed and our ship cleaned, I saw Cat standing by himself, looking over the site of the capital city of Ghent. I walked over to him cautiously, trying not to startle him. His head whipped around at me, a small white and orange paper cylinder filled with a foul-smelling gray powder hung from his mouth. He sucked in a breath through his mouth, the end of the cylinder lighting up and emitting some smoke. "G'day, mate," Cat said calmly, seeming to enjoy the strange narcotic that burned in his mouth. "Hello," I said, the shame from earlier feeling like a weight in my stomach. "I wanted to apologize about how I acted when I first met you. I was incredibly rude to you because of your slang, and that was wrong." My apologies were interrupted by Cat.
"All good, mate. Aussies tend to rub blokes the wrong way first time round,"
he said calmly, a gentle smile upon his face. He reached into his jacket and held out a small white paper box to me. "Sig?" he asked calmly. "Sig?" I asked in return.
"Never had a ciggy, mate?"
"No."
"Good. Keep it that way. These are terrible for your lungs, mate,"
he said with a chuckle. "Then why do you have them?" I asked.
"'Cause I'm a fucking stupid bloke and don't fucking care, mate,"
he laughed heartily.
"Seriously, mate, don't worry. If I bother you, I can find another ship to make me cash on."
"No!" I blurted out. Cat looked at me with confusion. No, I think it would be best if you stayed for a while. Tuller might need your help." Upon our return to IGC-controlled space, we got another order lined up to take to Seget. An order predominantly of minor medical cargo and some tools for repairing electronics. On the identification and payment sheet, I saw a new yet familiar name. Carter Cat Willis, onboard security specialist. And for the first time in my life, I felt rather happy to have a human on board. I knew if anything managed to sneak on, Cat would likely be able to fix it. I mean, he fixed a pirate boarding. What could be worse than that?